It is a story that has been told many times over many years, the Odyssey, or the tale of Odysseus, a hero of Greek myth. Homer has sung to us about the happenings of the Trojan War, but his most epic tale is about what comes afterwards. While the Iliad is a story in black and white, detailing the endless struggle between Europeans and Asians upon the dusty plains in front of Troy, an endless struggle, for one feels that Ajax and Hector, Agamemnon and Aeneas will always continue to breathe, sweat, and bleed upon that eternal landscape, a nightmare for them, and entertainment for us. The Odyssey, on the other hand, is a story in full color, linear and quite modern, tropical, and full of exciting episodes detailing Odysseus' return home after the terrible war and the adventures he suffers to get there. Odysseus is our hero, a quite singular hero at that, who we find stranded upon an island at the start of our story, in the cave of Calypso, the dread goddess who keeps him in her bed. Homer tells us that Odysseus is homesick and longs to return to Ithaca and Penelope, his loyal wife, who he hasn't seen in 20 years. It is easy to believe Homer, but one wonders if Odysseus did not somewhat enjoy his time upon the Mediterranean island and sleeping with the immortal Calypso. He did stay for nearly 7 years. Odysseus appears to be a different type of hero when compared to the other big names in Homeric literature. He is, of course, strong and well able to command and lead men in battle. However, Odysseus has a trait that sets him apart from the rest: his metis, or cunning, intelligence. Odysseus is not just able to overpower his enemies, he is able to outthink them. The most famous example of this is the wooden horse that the Greeks used to infiltrate and sack the city of Troy after 10 long years of war. Because of this trait, Odysseus has a great patron among the immortals of Olympus: Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom. Throughout the poem, Athena comes to his aid, helping Odysseus overcome his many struggles. Let us go on to the backstory. It is 2 decades before the events of the Odyssey. Odysseus is a young man, somewhere around the age of 20, and recently crowned king of Ithaca, though his father still lives. He travels to Sparta, along with many other young aristocrats of old Greece, in pursuance of marriage, for the fair Helen has come of age and a husband must be found for her. For weeks the suitors feast in the palace of Tyndareus, dance drunkenly and sing, but a man is still not chosen. Why? Odysseus, and Odysseus alone, knows the mind of the father. Our hero comes to Tyndareus, the foster father of Helen and king of Sparta, speaks with him apart from all the rest. Tyndareus fears bloodshed if one of the suitors is picked over the others, and Odysseus has a solution to his consternation. "But before I tell you how to make this all go smoothly," Odysseus tells him, "you must promise to get Penelope, your niece, for me to marry." So Tyndareus obliges, and Odysseus unfolds his plan. Make the suitors swear an oath that whosoever wins the hand of Helen in marriage will be guaranteed that marriage by all the rest. If anyone shall harm the future husband of Helen in his marriage, the rest shall all come to his aid. So it is done, and a man is picked. Noble Menelaus, the younger brother of Agamemnon, is chosen to marry Helen. And Odysseus returns home with his own marriage. Penelope will prove to be the better wife. A year or so has passed, and Penelope bears a son to Odysseus, named Telemachus. Odysseus and Penelope enjoy their fresh marriage on the Isle of Ithaca, far from the politics of mainland Greece. But across the sea, in the land of Sparta, all is not well. A young man by the name of Paris, a guest of Menelaus, who has now become king of Sparta, has stolen away Helen. Furious Menelaus invokes the oath of Tyndareus, and a great host begins to form from all corners of Greece to avenge his honor and get Helen back. Agamemnon, Menelaus, and Palamedes go to Ithaca to retrieve the man of wiles. What they find is an Odysseus seemingly gone mad, for Odysseus has been told by an oracle that if he were to go to Troy, he would not return home for 20 years. So when the sons of Atreus come to fetch him for their invasion, Odysseus dresses up in peasant's clothes and starts plowing his fields in an unusual fashion, using an ox and a donkey, and throwing salt over his shoulder. Palamedes places the infant Telemachus in front of the plow, and Odysseus pulls the team aside at the last moment, showing that he has not really gone crazy. Odysseus joins them, but does not forget what Palamedes has done, and later frames him, making it look like he was conspiring with the Trojans. Palamedes is stoned to death by the other Greeks. At Troy, Odysseus becomes one of Agamemnon's most valuable commanders and strategizers. After the war, Agamemnon says of him, "Only Odysseus, I dragged that man to the wars, but once in harness, he was a trace horse. He gave his all for me." In the Iliad, Odysseus restores order after Agamemnon loses control of the army, and everyone starts making to leave in the ships. Over a 10-year period, one can imagine Odysseus stepping up and contributing to the leadership of the Achaean army. In the end, of course, it was Odysseus who came up with the idea for the famous Trojan horse that finally ended the war. There are two main themes that run through the Odyssey. The first one, which runs along the surface of the poem, is about a man dealing with the aftermath of a terrible war. While Homer glorifies the fighting that was done in the Trojan War, he also is brutally honest about the dark side of war and its repercussions. Many of the Achaeans do not make it home, and for those that do, home itself is not always a respite from the consequences of the 10-year-long war. Agamemnon, we learn early in the Odyssey, made it home to Mycenae quickly after the war was over, but meets a grisly fate there. Menelaus does not return home to Sparta after many years after the war's conclusion, and our hero, Odysseus, takes even longer to reach home than him. What Odysseus finds after being gone for 2 decades is a mass of suitors who would like to marry his wife, and the way he deals with them is certainly a continuation of his wartime mindset, even though he had left Troy 10 years before. In this way, there are also mental and psychological consequences of the war, as we see Odysseus pulling his shirt over his face with shame to cover up his weeping when he hears a bard sing about the Trojan War, an event that everyone knew about by then. Homer doesn't have many moments like these, but they are there to remind us that under the ferocious and scheming Odysseus is a fragile, mortal man. The second main theme of the Odyssey is that of the guest-host relationship, called xeneia in Greek. Under the basic rules of this tradition, it is expected that a host invite their guest into their home without reservations. They must also provide their guest with food, a bath, and a place to sleep. It is also considered rude to ask a guest who they are and where they come from until their basic needs have been tended to. For instance, it would be very polite to not ask these questions of a guest until after they have at least had a meal and bathed. If they are allowed to sleep a night or two first, that's extra points for the host. On the other hand, many things are expected of a guest, of course. Xeneia is not one-sided. A good guest must only take what is offered to them by their host and should not overstay their welcome. And when the time comes, a good guest ought to tell their host about any news they have heard or seen from the outside world. This must have been especially important in ancient Greece without instant communication. This traditional guest-host relationship of hospitality and the guest's good behavior are obvious rules for good moral conduct, but they are also very crucial to a well-functioning society, so their reinforcement through Homeric epic makes a lot of sense. Xenia was so important, in fact, that Zeus was often prayed to as the protector of the guest-host relationship. This relationship underlies nearly every episode of the Odyssey, sometimes showing what good conduct looks like, sometimes what bad conduct looks like, and its consequences.